Now, earlier this week, the government published some details about its plans for immigration. The new system will come into force at the start of next year and it aims to reduce low-skilled immigration to the United Kingdom, with the government saying it wants to see Brits trained up to do jobs that would otherwise be done by migrants. But concerns have been expressed by business groups that the plans could lead to shortages of staff and knock-on effects for the economy. Well, one person with strong views on this is Labour's Shadow Home Secretary, Diane Abbott. She joins us now in the studio. Thank you for being with us this morning. So what do you make, then, of the government's plans for immigration?
I think they're completely misconceived. And it's all about looking as if they're tough on immigration, but they are not actually considering the underlying needs of the economy. And they also make the mistake of saying that your salary level tells the society how valued you are and what your contribution is to society. There are lots of people who play a very valuable role who are relatively low paid. The government should be starting at what the economy needs and what the society needs, and not playing dog whistle politics with immigration.
When we spoke to George Eustace about this earlier, and he was effectively saying that Brits can do some of the jobs, some of those low-skilled or low-paid jobs that you're talking about. Do you agree with that?
Anybody can do any job, but what we're talking about is the realities of social care in London and the South East, for instance. And you are not going to suddenly replace the EU migrants who are not able to come here. And the people that will suffer will be the people that need social care. It also has a knock-on effect on the NHS, because if you're not able to provide good social care services, you get people that the NHS is unable to discharge. This is a very misconceived policy. It's all about giving the impression of being hawkish on migration.
It will also be quite difficult to come to the UK unless you speak English. I mean, many of our viewers will think that that is fair enough. What's your view?
Well, it's fair enough, but actually it's a kind of dog whistle thing. You can't function in the British labour market if you don't speak English, and they've put that in to meet an issue that isn't a real issue. You cannot function in the British labour market without speaking English, and of course people should speak English, but mostly they do.
We're, of course, in the middle of a Labour leadership election, so policies at the minute are slightly still being worked on. But where do you think Labour should be on immigration? Should Labour be embracing free movement of people?
Well, I don't know about embracing free movement of people, but I support free movement. And the truth is, on the one hand, when we come out of the EU, free movement as such falls, but then we're going to have very long drawn-out negotiations about trade. And in reality, we're going to have a measure of free movement if we want to have any access at all to the single market. So freedom of movement is a reality. The problem with the debate is too many people use freedom of movement as a euphemism for immigration in general, and that's not helpful.
I mean, some would say, though, that the vote to leave for many people was a vote for control of borders. Not necessarily cutting immigration to really low levels, but just a control. And if there is free movement, you don't have control.
Well, this notion of control, again, we shouldn't be starting from that. We should be starting from what are the needs of the economy, what are the needs of society, and also the Tories' immigration policies send a really unpleasant message about us not valuing migrants and seeing migrants as some sort of problem.
Do you think that Britain's a racist country?
No, I think the Windrush Scandal showed us something. A lot of politicians talk and behave as if British people are anti-immigrant. What the Windrush Scandal showed us is actually the majority of British people value what migrants, generations of migrants have done, and what they want is a fair system, not an anti-migrant system with this dog whistle stuff about people have to be able to speak English.
I mean, talking about Windrush, according to The Times, an early draft of the report into the Home Office's handling of that Windrush scandal described the department as institutionally racist. Now, that's since been toned down. Do you think the Home Office is institutionally racist?
I worked for the Home Office years ago when I came down from Cambridge, and they had a little euphemism at the time about pressure to immigrate countries, and pressure to immigrate countries were black and brown countries. I don't think that the Home Office is full of individual racists, but I do think they run a system which is detrimental to black and brown migrants.
So would you say that is institutionally racist?
Well,
You're not talking about individuals, but as an institution.
institutional racism is a difficult phrase. I'm not talking about any individuals. I'm talking about our system. There's no question, and the Windrush Scandal was the best example of it, but there's no question, having worked there and having dealt with thousands of immigration cases down the years, that the Home Office runs a system which is detrimental to black and brown people.
OK. I'm keen to talk to you about the leadership contest that is running on as well. You're backing Rebecca Long-Bailey. What do you make of the contest so far?
Well, I think they're all very good candidates, let's be clear. I think that the advantage we would have with Rebecca Long-Bailey is that she's a great supporter of the movement. I mean, when...
what do you mean by the movement?
The Labour movement. And when Keir and Lisa stood down from the shadow cabinet in an attempt to force Jeremy Corbyn out, Becky stood by the member's choice, and that says something about her. I also think she brings some of the best characteristics of the other two. So, for instance, she's a lawyer, like Keir, so she has that very forensic approach to policy and is very good on detail. She comes from the north of England, like Lisa, and therefore she really understands how people felt. Many of them long-standing Labour voters that didn't feel able to support us in the past. And she's also the person that has constructed one of our most important and popular policies, the Green New Deal. So she's the one for me.
I'm interested to talk about how, when you were saying she's a supporter of the movement, are you worried that if Keir Starmer or Lisa Nandy wins over Rebecca Long-Bailey, that they'll move away from Corbynism?
I'm not saying that, but I am saying when times were tough and other people were stepping down from the front bench, Becky stood by the member's choice as leader, and I think that's important.
I mean, Lisa Nandy, for example, when she's addressed the fact that she stood down, has said that part of the reason was because she was worried about the way anti-Semitism was investigated. So she would say that standing by and doing nothing was the wrong thing to do.
Well, I understand her saying that, but I was there at the time, and I know why. I know what people like Lisa and Keir said about standing down. But, I don't want to talk about the past, but I want to talk about the importance of loyalty and the importance of the qualities that Becky will bring to the leadership.
Were they disloyal at the time?
I wouldn't want to say that, but, they did step down.
OK.
And Becky didn't.
OK. Who's your second preference going to?
Well, I'm not thinking about a second preference. For me, it's Becky.
OK, OK. Now, Jeremy Corbyn has said that he would happily serve in the next leader's shadow cabinet. Would you?
Well, I will be stepping down because I think that the new leader, whether it's Becky, whether it's Lisa, whether it's Keir, they have to be able to construct their own shadow cabinet. And, I was backbencher for a few years, and there's an awful lot to do on the backbenches. One of the things that I will want to do is make sure we don't make a swerve to the right on migration policy. I think that's a dead end for the Labour Party. We have to stand by our principles, stand by our values, and make sure we have an immigration policy which is fair and which is workable. OK. Would it be a shame if Labour didn't elect a woman leader? Well, I've been a campaigning feminist for 30 years, so of course I would like to see a woman leader. It's a little bit embarrassing that the Tories have had 2 women leaders and we have only never, ever had one. So that's part of why I'm supporting Becky. Not the most important thing, but it's one of the reasons I'm supporting Becky. So do you think it would be a bit embarrassing if the man won again? I don't think it'll be embarrassing exactly, but, we are long overdue a woman leader, and I think Becky is the right choice. OK. Now, I want to talk about the election loss, the worst result for Labour since 1935. Why do you think that devastating result happened? Well, some of the causes of our loss, particularly the erosion of our vote in the north and coalfield communities and so on, actually predate the Jeremy Corbyn leadership. I mean, the erosion of our support in some of those communities was going on under New Labour. But at the same time, the erosion of that support, they were votes that Tony Blair won in 1997. He did win, but the vote was eroding and continued to do so. This was our, very sadly, this was
You can't blame New Labour, surely, for the last election.
No, the point I'm making, this was our fourth failure to win an election on the trot. So you can't blame it entirely on the Corbyn leadership.
But was the Corbyn leadership partly to blame? Will you accept that?
Well, you know, I ran in Hackney North, and in Hackney North, they love Jeremy Corbyn. So
I can imagine that they did. But I have to say, when I went out to different parts of the country, not London, during the election campaign, his name came up an awful lot.
Well, it would do, because, I mean, I have never, you know, and I've been an MP for 30 years, seen the sort of attack on a Labour leader that Jeremy Corbyn had to endure. I mean, a really unpleasant attack.
But why are you saying voters are more gullible outside of London then? I don't understand why that would be any different in Hackney North or in Dudley North.
Well, it's a bit different in Hackney North because we're next door to Islington North, so a lot of them know Jeremy. No, it was a very difficult campaign. Jeremy had to withstand terrible attacks in the media. There was the issue of anti-Semitism, which people felt hadn't been dealt with adequately, rightly or wrongly. But it was part of a downturn in the Labour vote, which goes all the way back to 2010.
Some listening may think that you just haven't learned the lessons from that defeat. You're defending Jeremy Corbyn, talking about attacks in the media. You, of course, said that when it comes to Brexit, Labour should have been even more unequivocally Remain during that referendum. You're talking about New Labour and losses that have been happening over decades. Have you really come to terms with what happened?
Oh, I think I've come to terms. I remember, obviously, I was up on election night waiting to hear my own result, and the first result that came through was Blythe Valley. You know, and if you've been listening to general election results as long as I have, and when you hear we've lost Blythe Valley, you know we're in for a horrible night. So it was a horrible result. We have to learn the lessons. We have to select the right person for leader, and that's Becky Long-Bailey.
OK. Now, while you're here, I'm keen to ask about a tweet that you sent a few weeks ago. It has had some attention in the media, and it came after the former parliamentary official, David Leakey, accused the former Speaker, John Bercow, of bullying. And you sent this tweet, which you later deleted. The allegations come from a former parliamentary official, David Leakey. He's been a lieutenant general who served in Germany, Northern Ireland and Bosnia, but claims he was bullied, i.e. intimidated and coerced by John Bercow. Unlikely. Now, important, of course, to say John Bercow has denied the bullying allegations. But are you implying in this tweet that it's unlikely that somebody who was there in the army could have been bullied?
Anybody can be bullied. Anybody of any age or any profession can be bullied. I think intimidating Leakey is one thing, but of course anybody can be bullied.
But anyone can be intimidated as well, can't they?
Anybody can be intimidated. But I think that given Leakey and the leadership roles that he had played, as I said, I think it was unlikely he was intimidated by John Bercow, annoyed by John Bercow, insulted by John Bercow, but not intimidated.
Why don't you think he could have been intimidated? Surely anybody can be abused or bullied.
Anybody can be abused. And I know more about this than some members of Parliament because I remain the most abused online of any Labour MP. Mm-hmm. But all I was saying that was, given Leakey's history, seemed unlikely he'd actually be intimidated by John Bercow. But
I mean, some might say the same of you, though, like the first black woman to be elected to Parliament, in there since the 1980s. Anyone can.
Have you seen the stuff I get on new media, on Twitter all the time, about rape, about violence, abuse? Of course that's intimidating. Being intimidated is one thing, but then you have to move forward, and what I've done is move forward. But don't tell me that I'm supposed to put up with threats of violence against my family and threats of rape and daily abuse online, because I don't have to. What I do have to do is to continue to stand up for the things I believe in and move forward, and that is what I'm doing.
Absolutely, and that's why for so many people you are an inspiration when it comes to these subjects, and looking to you for how people should respond.
I think people should respond by, well, I think one of the things that the the media outlets, the online outlets should do is stop anonymity online. You can post under a pseudonym, but Twitter or Facebook or whoever should actually have your name and address, because when we try and follow up some of the really abusive things and threats of violence online, we cannot trace the people because no one has their name and address. So I think there needs to be an end to anonymity online. That's one of the things that should happen. And I also think that mainstream media, newspapers and television, should reflect on the way they can sometimes seem like an echo chamber to the worst abuse online. But I don't want to look back, and I don't want to talk about me. I want to look forward and to where the Labour Party can go and what the Labour Party can do under the leadership of Becky Long-Bailey.
Do you think that the Labour Party needs to address some of the issues that you've just been talking about there, though, when it comes to social media and what you would describe as the mainstream media as well?
Oh, I mean, yes, everyone has to address it. Because you know why it concerns me? I think we've discussed this before. It concerns me because I think young women and young BAME people thinking of coming into politics will be put off by the level of abuse that women politicians of both parties, actually, and BAME politicians get. And I don't want to see a new generation put off because of quite unreasonable levels of abuse online.
OK, Diane Abbott, thank you so much for being in the studio today. Much appreciated.